out voter registration forms just because you do not like the party registration of the voter. The reason it's illegal in lots of states, including Florida, to pay canvassers per registration is that it creates an incentive for that canvasser to make up fake registrations, to make up fake people that register to vote so they can get paid for those registrations. It is a form of fraud and it is a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily affect any election outcomes because those are fake people who are being made up and registered. Those fake people don't exist in the real world, so they're not going to show up and vote. The actually worrying thing in voter registration fraud is if you do get real people to fill out real voter registration forms and they therefore believe they are registered, and then because you don't like their party affiliation, you tear that up, and then that real person thinks they've registered, they show up on election day only to find out that they're not actually on the rolls and they're not going to be allowed to vote. After the reports in the past few days, the Republicans' firm is now under investigation in Florida and reportedly in Nevada and in North Carolina. And the collapse of the Republicans' voter registration scheme has resulted in the Republican Party ceasing all voter registration efforts in 5 of the swingiest swing states in the country, with another week and a half left for them to be trying to register voters. They're not going to be able to do that. They have ended those efforts. Just a remarkable development. Joining us now is E.J.Dionne, columnist of The Washington Post, MSNBC contributor, and author of Our Divided Political Heart, The Battle of the American Idea in an Age of Discontent. E.J., it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
The Republican Party entrusted its voter registration efforts in half the key swing states to a group that has a bad track record and now seems to have gotten itself in very hot water this year. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I can't remember anything like this before. I had this mischievous thought that the Republicans haven't been able to find very much voter fraud to justify all these voter ID laws, so they decided to create some themselves. And actually, that is one of the sort of terrible downsides of this, if they now use this as an excuse for saying, well, see, we really need these terribly tough voter ID laws, because I think you made the essential point. I mean, there are two kind of broad points of view on this. One is, we are so worried about fraud that we're going to make it really, really hard for a whole lot of people to vote, or that this whole process is supposed to make it easy for people to cast ballots. And that the worst thing they did was to destroy people's voter registration forms. But I don't remember anything like this except Acorn. And I think this is where we're going to have to ask our conservative friends. They went nuts over Acorn, the progressive group, sort of having some bad registrations. Acorn itself, by the way, had called the attention of voter registrars to the fraud themselves. They disciplined themselves. And yet this was a big scandal, and Acorn lost a whole lot of money and had to go out of business. Why isn't this the same thing for conservatives, given what they did to Acorn?
The thing that's amazing to me about it, though, is that Acorn was a community-based group, a legitimately community-based group. It was not a fake grassroots group at all. As you say, they are the ones that realized that they had some canvassers who were screwing up voter registrations. They raised their hands and said, these are wrong. They disciplined the people who did it, and that was it. Yeah. The Democratic Party was not counting on Acorn to be its sole voter registration vendor in the 5 most important swing states in the country. And the Republican Party counting on this group when they knew it had enough problems that it asked them to change their name to avoid the bad appearance of their previous scandals seems to me like a real Republican problem more than a jerky consulting company problem.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder what priority were they giving voter registration, period, if they were giving it all to this one company. And you also wonder, what is it in the connections among consultants and the party that made all this money go there? And I think it's, in a way, the people who should be most upset about this are rank-and-file Republicans, because the Democrats are going great guns. Obama's registered something like 250,000 new voters in North Carolina. Everybody said North Carolina won't really be competitive this time. I thought that, along with Indiana, it was probably one of those 2 states were the ones he was most likely to lose. Yet he's holding up in the polls. And if he carries it, it is probably going to be that registration edge from the massive voter registration that he is doing, and now the Republicans can't do it.
Watching some of the, one of the things I did today in prepping the segment was watch a lot of local news coverage of how this is being covered, just local network media coverage. And seeing it covered in Colorado, I keep hearing from people I know who live in Colorado, don't believe the polls. It's a lot closer than it seems. Colorado's going to be really, really hard fought. Maybe Mitt Romney had a hard time here in the primaries in 2012. He did great here in 2008, and people remember him. He's going to have half of what the Colorado Republican Party has spent on this election. It's spent on that voter registration contract with this bogus company that has now been fired and now can do no work in the last home stretch of this campaign. I mean, there's a basic competence issue in terms of what it means to run a party here. I mean, I feel like the rank and file voters must be duped, but the state parties must be enraged. They must be furious.
Well, they must be enraged, and I think you've seen some real money management issues. Remember all the stories that Mitt Romney was going to outspend Barack Obama by vast sums of money. Yeah. And then we learned that the campaign didn't have quite as much money as we thought they had. And so maybe if you're not supposed to quote Mike Dukakis, maybe it is an ideology, maybe it's about competence.